Before we begin, make sure you're sitting somewhere quiet, because today's story isn't just about a missing plane. It's about a man of faith whose disappearance would shake the very foundations of the Church itself. In 2000, a respected Catholic Archbishop boarded a small private aircraft bound for Panama. He never arrived. For years, his name became just another mystery whispered about in both Vatican corridors and small-town chapels. But in 2002, deep in the mountains of northern Mexico, a local shepherd stumbled upon something buried, something that would expose lies, secrets, and a truth more haunting than anyone was prepared for. So before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you love unraveling unsolved disappearances and mysterious vanishings, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because what happened to Archbishop Luis Ortega is a tale the Church tried to forget. It was a fog-choked morning over the Sierra Madre Mountains in northern Mexico, the kind that seemed to swallow both sound and sunlight. A local shepherd, Miguel Alvarez, was the first to spot something unusual, a glint of metal deep within the forested slopes. He had walked that path for years, guiding his flock across the ridges. But on that cold March morning in 2002, what caught his eye was no ordinary scrap of metal. When he hiked closer, pushing through thick undergrowth, Miguel saw what looked like a torn piece of fuselage, pale silver, scorched black at the edges. And just beyond it, tangled in vines, was the unmistakable emblem of a cross. Within hours, word spread through the mountain village of San Pedro del Monte. A wreck had been found. Locals whispered that it could be the missing charter plane carrying Archbishop Luis Ortega, a beloved but controversial Catholic figure who had vanished 2 years prior while en route to a secret Vatican conference in Panama. Authorities arrived swiftly, cordoning off the site. Reporters from the nearest city, Monterrey, flooded the village. And as the wreckage was carefully uncovered, one thing became immediately clear. The plane hadn't simply crashed. It had been hidden. Pieces of the fuselage were deliberately covered with soil and branches. Some parts of the wreck were burned far more than what an accident could explain. And the black box, the one item that could have told investigators what happened, was missing. But that was only the beginning. Inside the cockpit, among the twisted remains, investigators found a single rosary. Its silver beads were warped by heat, and the cross at the end was broken clean in half. On April 11, 2000, Archbishop Luis Ortega boarded a small twin-engine Cessna at San Luis Potosí Airport. The flight manifest listed only 3 names: Ortega himself, his private pilot Diego Ramos, and an assistant named Sister Maria Esteban. Their destination was Panama City, where Ortega had reportedly been called for a private meeting with Vatican officials regarding a controversial financial investigation involving several dioceses in Latin America. The plane took off under clear skies at 9:12 a.m. According to the control tower, the last radio contact occurred at 10:37 a.m., when the pilot reported turbulence over the Sierra Madre region. Then, silence. No Mayday call. No distress signal. Just nothing. When the plane never arrived in Panama, a massive search operation began, funded jointly by both the Mexican government and the Church. For weeks, rescue teams combed through the mountains, guided by satellite imaging and aerial reconnaissance. They found no trace. After 3 months, the search was officially called off. The official explanation: crash due to severe weather and pilot error. But that never sat right with the people closest to the Archbishop. Because 2 weeks before his disappearance, Ortega had told his secretary something strange, that he was afraid for his life. "If anything happens to me," he'd said, "do not trust the report. The truth will come from the mountains." At the time, no one understood what he meant. But those words would echo eerily when, 2 years later, a shepherd would stumble upon that wreck, buried in the same mountains Ortega had mentioned. Investigators pieced together the flight path again. And that's when they noticed something chilling. The aircraft had deviated 180 kilometers off course before vanishing. Someone had changed the route manually, mid-flight. The question was, who? The pilot's background revealed nothing unusual, a veteran with 15 years of flight experience. Sister Maria, on the other hand, had joined the Archbishop's staff only months before the incident. And her name, investigators would later learn, didn't appear in any church employment record. She was never found among the remains. When the wreck was officially confirmed as the Archbishop's missing plane, Vatican investigators arrived almost immediately. But their presence in Mexico raised eyebrows. Local authorities were barely given time to assess the site before a team of priests, led by Father Miguel Cardoza, took control of the scene. Within hours, they seized all recovered materials, flight logs, communication records, and fragments of the plane's navigation system, citing church jurisdiction. The Mexican Civil Aviation Authority wasn't even allowed to keep copies. Rumors began to swirl in the nearby town of San Pedro del Monte. Locals claimed that men in black clerical robes were seen burning something near the crash site at dawn. Others said they heard chanting echoing through the forest that same night. It all sounded like superstition, until a journalist named Clara Nunez began to investigate. Clara worked for a small but fearless newspaper out of Monterrey. She was known for her deep dives into church corruption and secret financial networks. When she heard that the missing Archbishop's wreck had been found, and that the Vatican had intervened so quickly, she sensed something much darker beneath the surface. In one of her first reports, Clara published a leaked document supposedly retrieved from an anonymous source inside the Archdiocese. It was titled simply, Ortega Inquiry, Restricted. The report contained references to embezzlement, bribery, and, most shockingly, the transfer of millions of dollars through offshore accounts under church charities. At the center of it all, Archbishop Luis Ortega. But not as a culprit, as the one who exposed it. He had been gathering evidence against several high-ranking church officials in Mexico and Rome. His trip to Panama wasn't to attend a conference, it was to hand over the documents to a Vatican prosecutor. If true, that meant his disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a warning. Clara's exposé made national headlines for 2 days, until her editor received a cease and desist order directly from the Vatican's legal department. By the following week, the paper's website was taken down. Clara herself vanished from Monterrey 3 months later. Her car was found abandoned near the same mountain road that led to the crash site. The last article she ever published ended with a single line. The truth was buried, not by earth, but by holy hands. Among all the wreckage pulled from that mountainside, one object stood out, a rosary, its silver beads blackened by fire, the crucifix snapped clean in half. At first, investigators dismissed it as a personal belonging of the Archbishop. But when forensic technicians examined it, they noticed something strange. The inside of the cross wasn't solid silver. It had been hollowed out, and inside was the fragment of a microfilm, the kind used for classified document transfers in the late 90s. The microfilm was damaged, but experts recovered a few legible frames. They showed rows of handwritten entries in Latin, numbers, and initials, none of which made immediate sense. But at the top of each document, one phrase appeared repeatedly. Project Sanctum, Arch Evo D. Whatever it meant, it was enough to reopen the investigation under the highest secrecy. 2 weeks later, however, the microfilm vanished from the evidence vault. The officer assigned to guard it, Lieutenant Alvarez, was found dead in his apartment the next morning. The official cause, self-inflicted gunshot wound. His family claimed otherwise. The case grew darker with each layer uncovered. Meanwhile, locals began reporting something unsettling near the crash site. Strange lights moving through the trees at night, men carrying equipment, and the faint sound of Latin hymns echoing in the distance. Some even swore they saw the figure of a priest kneeling by the wreckage, whispering prayers before disappearing into the mist. When reporters tried to revisit the area, they were turned away by military personnel who insisted the zone was environmentally restricted. But an ex-soldier, who later spoke anonymously, revealed that what was being guarded wasn't nature. It was a second site, a cave located just half a kilometer from the wreck. Inside that cave, he said, were wooden crates marked with the Vatican seal. He never said what was in them. Only that one night, while guarding the perimeter, he heard chanting, and something metallic being lowered deep into the earth. And then, silence. The broken rosary, once dismissed as debris, was now the thread tying everything together. The Archbishop's disappearance, the Vatican's rapid interference, and the chilling suggestion that something had been hidden out there. Something the Church never wanted the world to see. By late 2003, the wreckage had long been cleared, and the official narrative was buried under a blanket of bureaucracy. But the villagers of San Pedro del Monte never forgot. Especially one, Father Tomás Ibáñez, the local parish priest. He had served under Archbishop Ortega years before and had always admired the man's quiet courage. Tomás had grown increasingly uneasy after Vatican officials sealed off the mountains and declared the crash investigation closed. He began conducting his own quiet inquiries, starting with the villagers who had seen lights in the forest. That's when he learned of the cave. The shepherd who first discovered the wreck mentioned it in passing, a small stone opening beneath an ancient wooden cross, carved into the mountain centuries earlier by missionaries. The cross had since fallen, but its base remained, hidden under ivy and moss. Father Tomás trekked up to the site one moonless night, guided only by a lantern and his faith. The air was cold, the silence heavy. After hours of climbing, he reached the fallen cross. Beneath it, just as described, was a dark opening in the rock, narrow but deep. He entered. Inside, the cave walls were lined with strange markings, Latin phrases, scripture verses, and symbols he recognized from old monastic orders that hadn't existed for centuries. But what unsettled him most wasn't the writing. It was what lay at the center. 3 wooden crates, each branded with a faded seal, a double key emblem, the insignia of the Vatican's secret archives. The same mark the ex-soldier had described. When Father Tomás pried open the first crate, he found stacks of parchment sealed in wax. They were old, far older than any modern church record should have been. Many pages were brittle, ink-faded, but one bore a title still legible. De Sacramentis et Silentio, of the Sacraments and Silence. As he leafed through the pages, he saw names, dates, and something else, drawings of ritual markings, similar to the ones on the cave walls. But near the back of the document, one entry froze him completely. It listed a name and date. Luis Ortega, initiated 1984, witnessed the unveiling. His hands trembled. If this document was authentic, it meant Ortega had been involved, or at least aware, of some kind of ritual order within the church that no one was supposed to know existed. Then he noticed something scratched onto the cave wall beside the crates, faint but unmistakable. The same Latin phrase found on the microfilm fragment. Project Sanctum, Arch Evo D. At that moment, Father Tomás heard movement behind him, soft footsteps echoing from the mouth of the cave. His lantern flickered. A voice spoke from the darkness. "You were never meant to find this, Father." The lantern went out. When the villagers found Tomás's jeep abandoned at the base of the mountain the next morning, his notebook lay open on the seat. The final entry read, "The Archbishop didn't vanish. He was taken back." Months after Father Tomás's disappearance, San Pedro del Monte returned to its uneasy rhythm. The Vatican declared his death a tragic accident, claiming he had fallen during a private pilgrimage. Few believed it. But one person refused to let the story die, Lucia Ortega, the Archbishop's niece. Lucia was a documentary filmmaker based in Guadalajara, known for her investigations into religious power and secrecy. She had grown up idolizing her uncle, the man who baptized her, and who used to say, "Truth is God's only weapon." After hearing rumors of Father Tomás's final notes, she drove to San Pedro and began filming everything. The villagers' accounts, the wreck site, even the local folklore that had formed around the tragedy. Everyone warned her to stop. Then, one evening, an unmarked envelope arrived at her hotel. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled simply, Confessio, Ortega. Lucia digitized the tape immediately. The voice that played through her speakers was unmistakable, her uncle's. The recording began with the faint hum of an aircraft engine and the sound of rain hitting metal. Then came his trembling voice. "If anyone finds this, I pray you'll understand I did not run from my duty. I was called to reveal what no servant of the Lord should ever see." He spoke of secret gatherings in monasteries, rituals older than Catholicism itself, where powerful figures within the Church performed the renewal, a ceremony meant to preserve influence by binding new archbishops to an oath of silence. "They told me the Church's survival depended on obedience, not truth," Ortega continued. "But what I found in Archivo D, what they call Project Sanctum, it is not of God. It is of men who wish to be gods." His breathing grew ragged. Metal screeched in the background, followed by shouts, likely the pilot and Sister Maria. "They know," Ortega whispered. "They changed the flight path. They said we are flying into light." Then, a single deafening bang. The tape cut to static. Lucia replayed it over and over, analyzing the sounds, comparing timestamps. The aircraft noise was consistent with recordings from a Cessna cockpit. The voice, verified by her uncle's past interviews, was authentic. But one thing didn't add up. Forensic audio specialists later discovered that parts of the tape had been recorded after the crash date, meaning someone had spliced in segments from another moment in time. The confession wasn't just a dying message. It was edited. The question was, by whom? Lucia began to suspect the Vatican's intelligence wing, the Sodalicium Pianum, a secret network of clerics tasked with suppressing heresy. Founded a century ago, many believed it had long been disbanded. But the tape suggested otherwise. Her investigation would soon uncover one final, horrifying link between her uncle, Father Tomas, and the Church's hidden order. And it all led back to the mountain. By 2004, the mystery of Archbishop Ortega had become more legend than investigation. The Church had buried the story beneath official condolences and carefully worded press releases. But Lucia Ortega was done with silence. She returned to the Sierra Madre with a small camera crew, determined to retrace her uncle's final flight path and uncover what Father Tomas had found in the cave. The villagers still remembered her family name. Some helped her discreetly, others crossed themselves and refused to speak. "The mountain remembers," one old woman whispered, "but it does not forgive." Lucia's team hiked through the same forested ridges where the wreck had once been discovered. Most of the site had been cleared, but the smell of rust and oil still hung in the soil. When they reached the ridge near the fallen wooden cross, Lucia noticed something strange: fresh tire tracks, leading deeper into the forest. They followed the trail until it ended at a steel gate with no markings. The air around it was unnaturally still. A faint hum echoed from somewhere underground. That night, while camping near the site, Lucia recorded her video journal. "If anyone sees this," she said softly into the lens, "know that I'm not chasing ghosts. I'm chasing the truth my uncle died for." Just before dawn, her sound technician woke her. In the distance, pale light flickered between the trees, not campfires, but electric lamps. Silhouettes moved in procession, holding what looked like candles. And at the front of the group, dressed in dark robes, a man carried a broken silver rosary. Lucia and her team hid, filming through the brush. The procession stopped at the gate. One of the figures unlocked it and disappeared inside. The rest began chanting in Latin, words Lucia couldn't fully translate, but later identified as fragments from the Book of Revelation. Then, all at once, the lights went out. Moments later, the forest erupted with the sound of engines. A black van tore down the dirt road, heading straight for the crew's campsite. They ran, abandoning their tents, cameras, everything, except for the small handheld recorder Lucia kept around her neck. The next morning, hikers found the campsite destroyed. Her crew's equipment was gone. The only trace left behind was Lucia's journal, half buried in the mud. The final entry, time-stamped 2:14 a.m., read, "The gate leads underground. I heard chanting. I think they found the other crates. And one of them knew my name." Lucia was never seen again. 3 weeks later, footage from her lost camera appeared anonymously online. A 30-second clip showing a tunnel carved in stone, flickering lights, and the sound of a single voice whispering, "Project Sanctum Lives." The leaked footage spread across underground forums and conspiracy boards within days. Most dismissed it as a hoax. But to those who had followed the Archbishop's disappearance from the beginning, it was undeniable proof that something beneath the Church's polished image had begun to surface. And Archbishop Luis Ortega, it seemed, had stumbled onto their trail. Investigators who dared to reopen the case pieced together an unnerving pattern. Every figure connected to Ortega's disappearance, from the pilot to Sister Maria to Father Tomas, had ties, however distant, to parishes once governed by members of the order. Even more disturbing was a letter recovered from Ortega's old seminary office, written months before his death. It was addressed to His Holiness but never mailed. In it, Ortega described discovering hidden chambers beneath monasteries, where rituals involving silence, confession, and binding oaths took place. Ceremonies meant not to cleanse the soul, but to seal it. "I fear," he wrote, "that what once was faith has become theater, and the actors no longer remember their lines." For centuries, the order had acted in shadows, controlling information, ensuring that the Church's public face remained pure, no matter the cost. Project Sanctum, the operation Ortega uncovered, appeared to be their modern incarnation, a systematic effort to erase any record of their existence. Now, Lucia's footage had exposed the last piece, the underground gate in the mountains. Authorities launched an investigation, but when they arrived, the gate was gone. The ground had been bulldozed flat. Only fragments of scorched metal and a melted silver rosary remained. But 2 locals swore they saw something days before the site was cleared, a group of men in cassocks, chanting as they sealed the tunnel with concrete. One of them carried a crucifix carved from black wood, engraved with 2 Latin words, "In silentio potestas." In silence there is power. The world had forgotten Archbishop Luis Ortega. But deep inside Vatican vaults, his name was not erased. It was classified. In the spring of 2005, 5 years after Archbishop Luis Ortega's disappearance, a Vatican archivist named Father Renato Bianchi requested asylum in Switzerland. His claim was extraordinary, that he possessed documents proving the Church had orchestrated a cover-up of a high-ranking clergyman's death. The man he referred to was none other than Archbishop Ortega. Father Bianchi's asylum hearing was closed to the public, but leaked transcripts revealed fragments of his testimony. He stated that Ortega's personal belongings, including letters and diaries, had been confiscated upon his disappearance and stored under the code name Sanctum, Dossier 47. 2 weeks before defecting, Bianchi had copied portions of those files and mailed them to a journalist in Rome. Inside the envelope was a single handwritten page, Ortega's final letter, dated the day before his flight vanished. The ink was smudged, the tone uneven, but its words were devastatingly clear. "If you read this, then I have failed. They told me faith is obedience, but I have seen what obedience becomes when the truth is forbidden. The order lives, buried in stone and secrecy. They speak of salvation, but what they seek is control. I will go to Panama not for confession, but confrontation." The letter ended abruptly, followed by a line written in haste. "If I do not return, the mountain will speak for me." Forensic linguists verified the handwriting as authentic. The Vatican dismissed it as a forgery, yet within months of its leak, Father Bianchi was found dead in his apartment, reportedly from a heart attack. The same night, the journalist who received the documents was detained for violating national security protocols. But the story refused to die. Across Mexico, whispers of La Montaña del Silencio, the Mountain of Silence, grew into a legend. Hikers who ventured too close reported the sound of distant chanting carried by the wind. Some said they'd seen figures in robes wandering through the mist at dusk. Others claimed they heard a voice, calm and sorrowful, reciting the Lord's Prayer in Latin. Whether those were echoes of the past or something else, no one could say. Lucia's unfinished documentary was later recovered from a cloud backup. The final scene, her last recorded voiceover, fades in over static footage of the mountains. They built their faith on silence. But silence can't bury truth forever. One day, what they hid beneath the cross will be unearthed. And when that day comes, even heaven will have to answer. The screen went black. Nearly 2 decades passed before anyone dared to revisit the forbidden slope of San Pedro del Monte. By then, time and vegetation had reclaimed the scars left by the crash, covering the past in roots and silence. But in 2021, a government geological team conducting soil surveys for mining rights discovered something unexpected. Their scanners picked up metallic density nearly 30 meters beneath the surface, perfectly symmetrical, rectangular, and cold. At first, they believed it to be remnants of the old wreck. But when they began to dig, they realized the debris was deeper than the crash zone had ever reached. Beneath the mountain's hardened layers, they uncovered an iron vault, sealed with wax, bound by chains, and bearing an engraving that had not been seen in over a century. The twin keys and the broken cross. Inside were dozens of wooden boxes, each stamped with the same emblem and coded markings. Every box contained documents, thousands of them, written in multiple languages and spanning centuries. Files about missing clergy, hidden bank accounts, and religious experiments cloaked as miracles. And among them, a single object resting on crimson velvet, a silver rosary, broken at the cross. When news of the discovery reached Vatican officials, they arrived within 48 hours. The excavation was halted under diplomatic orders, the site sealed off by armed guards, and every artifact was loaded into unmarked vehicles that vanished into the night. The official government report was quietly rewritten, "Subterranean anomaly, no findings of significance." But one miner kept a copy of a photograph he'd taken before the crates were removed, the open vault, the faded insignia, and a small inscription carved into the inner wall. Project Sanctum, for those who forgot the light. He leaked the image online months later. It spread briefly before being scrubbed from every major platform. Yet fragments of it survive, reposted by those who refuse to let the story fade. To this day, the Vatican denies the existence of any operation called Project Sanctum. The remains of Archbishop Luis Ortega were never officially recovered. Neither were Lucia Ortega, Father Tomas, or the others who sought the truth buried in that mountain. And yet, locals still claim that on certain nights, when fog rolls low and the bells of San Pedro del Monte fall silent, you can hear a voice echoing from the forest, whispering in Latin, "Veritas lux mea." The truth is my light. Some stories are too heavy for history to carry. They don't end, they linger, waiting for someone brave enough to dig again. If this story left you thinking, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because next time, we're uncovering another disappearance the world tried to erase. And remember, sometimes, what's buried in silence still speaks.